For the first time ever, I am thrilled to say we have an official sponsor for the Dirt Talk podcast, and that's Ariat. I've worn Ariat boots on every job site I've visited over the years, traveling in them across 5 continents. More importantly, I have yet to find a single project where working folks, unlike me, are not wearing Ariat boots and workwear in every condition imaginable. And there's really good reason for that, and that's because it's phenomenal stuff. And the more I've learned about Ariat and the company, the more I've loved their brand. So with this, Ariat is offering any Dirt Talk listener 10% off their next Ariat order at ariat.com/dirttalk. That's 10% off boots, jeans, and workwear at ariat.com/dirttalk or at the link in this episode's description. With that, let's get to the show. Are we on?
What do we got?
Is this thing on?
Yes.
Today is a Monday episode, and we're going to look over some very, very exciting paperwork I have in front of me. I have 2 pieces of paper here, or packets of paper. Both are from the AGC, the Associated General Contractors of America. First is A Construction Market in Transition, the 2024 Construction Hiring and Business Outlook. This was published beginning of 2024. And then I have the May 2024 U.S. Construction Outlook, Torrid or Tepid, thanks to Ken Simonson, Chief Economist at the AGC of America. I'm not going to read all of this verbatim because it's a little dry. It's economics, etc. But I read through it all. And I pulled out some pretty interesting key points. So if you're sitting there wondering where the overall American construction industry is at this year and how others are feeling and what the pain points are and what the future is looking like, this is hopefully going to address those key things here. I'm going to start with the 2024 Construction Hiring and Business Outlook. It's older data, like I said, published beginning of this year. This was based on a enormous survey. The AGC constructed the survey that serves as the basis for this report between November and December of 2023, with a total of 1,293 firms from 49 states and the District of Columbia completing the survey. So it's a pretty big sample size, which is good, because sometimes you need to look at, if you get a survey, you need to look at how many people responded to the survey, because if you have 3 participants, it's not very good information. But this, over 1,000 construction companies, awesome. So going into 2024, contractors are struggling to cope with significant labor shortages, the impacts of higher interest rates and costs, and a supply chain that, while better, is still far from normal. Those are the key themes here. The participants in this survey, the projects, the types of projects that they found would have the highest increase of value are water, sewer, transportation, bridge, highway, federal, and power. So it's infrastructure. Dirt World was ranking number 1 for what firms thought would get the most spending this year. And then at the bottom in the negative territory, so those are in very positive territory, down at the bottom with negative territory, lodging, retail, and private office are the lowest by a long shot. And we can get into some of the why here. A big piece of the why, or at least the why that should have been, was the bipartisan infrastructure law that went into effect, I believe, 2 years ago now. So unleashed, or was supposed to unleash a lot of federal money for Dirt World. While the Biden administration has been aggressive in announcing funding for many high-profile infrastructure and construction projects, it has demonstrated less enthusiasm for making legally required reforms to the federal review and permitting process. As a result, construction has yet to begin on many of the funded projects. Adding to those delays are cumbersome new Buy America rules the administration has put in place that make it confusing and difficult for officials to ensure all products being used on a project are in compliance. These delays are likely one reason why contractor expectations for several public market segments are down this year compared to the start of 2023. So people were expecting to see more money released within this year, but if asked what the actual impact has been so far for the Infrastructure and Jobs Act on firms' business, 33% reported no impact, and then a majority has either bid on projects but not won anything, or has won work but hasn't started yet. Only 9% of firms reported actually working on these new projects. So we have, and I'll get more into it with the construction outlook, but we have a slow public sector, especially within office space, because of interest rates and because of office availability right now. Yeah. There's a lot of federal dollars out there available, but even when they're awarded, a lot of projects have not yet even begun because of some of the cumbersome rules associated with the federal dollars. Going into hiring, hiring expectations are high, but so are the obstacles. So most firms anticipate adding workers in 2024 to accommodate the higher demand for projects. More than 2/3 of respondents expect to add to their headcount, compared to only 10% who expect a decrease. So that's quite substantial. However, respondents expect difficulty adding workers, a situation that has changed little over the past year. 77% of respondents report they are having a hard time filling some or all salaried or hourly craft positions, close to the 80% who reported difficulty in the 2023 survey. Only 10% say they're having no difficulty. In addition, the majority, which is 55%, expects that hiring will continue to be hard, and then 20% expects it to become only harder. Both non-union and union firms have reported just about the same difficulty for finding qualified people. Going into interest rates and the rising costs associated with building stuff, nearly 2/3 of respondents say projects have been postponed or canceled because of funding issues. More than half of firms say a project was postponed or canceled due to rising costs, while 38% of firms cite rising interest rates as a cause of deferrals. In addition, 34% cite reduced funding availability. So projects are being postponed or canceled due to rising construction costs, which have been out of control over the past few years, interest rates for those private projects, and then reduced funding availability for those government projects. Because what's happening with government work is, rising costs, inflation in construction has been 30+%. And so the government only has so much money allocated to certain jobs. So they're having to take some money over here, allocate it over here to finish this work, which then gives them less over here for what they expected.
So jobs are running over and materials are more expensive for some of those?
Materials are just out of control.
Materials are crazy.
Completely out of control.
And then when you talk about interest rates, because this is something I don't really know much about, are we talking about like interest rates for the housing market in general, or?
No, it's interest rates essentially affect all debt.
Okay.
So the Federal Reserve, they set interest rates. They've been ramping up interest rates over the past few years, which everybody has probably noticed with their mortgage. But the stuff they don't notice is all of the other development. So developers, when you go develop a warehouse, you're not paying cash, you're borrowing. And so now that borrowing is a lot more expensive, some of these projects aren't even viable to begin with.
Okay, so they had a plan of, hey, we need to borrow this much money, and then interest rates went crazy, and
Yeah.
now the project is completely undoable.
Yeah, or they're just saying, "Oh, we're gonna wait and see what the feds do."
Yeah,
'Cause we
because
don't
if it
need to build it.
drops again, then this project might
It
be
could be.
viable.
Yep.
Okay.
Going into top concerns, speaking to a lot of this already, 3 concerns top contractors are worried about for 2024. 64% pick rising interest rates and financing costs as one of their biggest concerns. 63% list insufficient supply of workers or subcontractors. And 62% name economic slowdown or recession. So those were the top 3. And respondents were offered 22 choices, and they could even write in their own. So workers, interest rates, and where the heck the market is going future state. Going to workers, besides worrying about worker quality, 81% of firms view inexperienced, skilled labor or workforce shortage as a challenge regarding the safety and health of workers, which is big. Yes, even if we can find workers, they've never been on a job site before, and so they're not productive, or worse, they can pose a danger to those around them.
Doesn't that feel like a kind of a cop-out, though?
It is, but this is really just asking them how they're feeling. So
Yeah.
I
guess
could be
it's an
investing in
opinion.
training and still be worried about the quality of workforce. So, I think that's what's like a Hoopah, for example. They're investing so much in training because they're feeling the effect of less skill in today's workforce, and so they've said, "Hey, we're feeling this effect, so we need to be the ones to generate that skill ourselves."
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of other great examples of that happening.
You don't know the intention that they're
this is
checking that box off.
just purely reporting how you're feeling.
Yeah.
So going into the more modern data, it's quite interesting. I mean, I'm reading this off too because this matches all of my conversations in the industry right now.
Yeah.
Rising costs and inflation is a huge concern. I think contractors are very uneasy right now, and you cannot talk to a single contractor without the mention of the labor constraints and of the quality of labor in today's market. Interestingly, current construction job openings in March of 2024, it was 295,000 openings, down about 7% from 2023. We saw a lot of openings in 22, 21, and I think that's because some people were cut in 2020. And then when demand stayed or came back, contractors had to add a lot of people. So we peaked at nearly 500,000 open jobs in 22. Now we're about 300,000 today. And I don't see that going anywhere. I see that just trending upwards. It's the highest it's been over the past few years. Is the highest number of openings in over 20 years in the United States in the construction industry. And it's just trending in the up and to the right direction when it comes to looking at a graph because of people retiring.
Yeah.
This is interesting. This is the input costs. So the costs of materials. How much has it really gone up? And they call it the Producer Price Index, or PPI, for inputs and bid prices. The change in construction costs since 2020, February of 2020, is 39%.
Oof.
So construction costs have gone up 39%. Bid prices have gone up 32%. So they've almost matched the inputs there. So if I bid the same project today versus the project in just 4 years ago, a little more than 4 years ago, it'll be 30 to 40% more expensive. That's crazy.
And they're adjusting for interest.
No,
So-
that's part of it.
Oh,
No,
that's
no, no,
part of
but
it?
this
This
is federal. This is so this isn't interest. No, this is
This-
just my rock is more expensive. My
Yeah.
diesel fuel is more expensive. My pipe's more expensive. My equipment's more expensive. This is everything. My labor. This is
Okay.
everything's just more expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So 40%. That's what contractors are dealing with right now behind the scenes. This isn't talked about a lot in the field, but this is the squeeze they're feeling, and then this is the squeeze governments are feeling because they plan their budgets in 5-year increments.
Yeah.
And so within 5 years, your costs go up 40%. You have less dollars to allocate, obviously. That's a huge hit.
And you still want to be aggressive on bids. You can't just, that's why it's less. Like
No, it's lagging. Because
Yeah,
you're bidding work and then you're performing the work sometimes a year later, 6 months later, 2 years later.
So it's already changed. So it's like trying to hit a moving target.
You're trying to hit a moving target.
I see.
Yeah. So it would always lag based on where the prices go. It's evened out a little bit, but the big spike was in between 2022 and 2023, and contractors are still trying to figure out how to really balance things here. Some of the big changes over the past year in materials: cement is up another 5%. Ready-mix concrete is up another 7%. Diesel fuel was down, but now it's going back up. And so you bid your project based on a certain rate of diesel fuel, but it goes way up, and that's what you said you can do it for. And so what do you do? Change in construction spending, March 2024 versus March 2023. Total construction is up 10%. And the biggest categories that saw a significant change, over 20% additional spending, is manufacturing and highway and street. And both of those are because of federal dollars. Manufacturing being the CHIPS Act, highway and street being the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, which I talked about a little before. So to summarize here, the medium-term outlook for construction: economic recovery should continue, but with sticky inflation and interest rates. Multifamily warehouse office, steep drops likely as vacancies and costs climb because of those interest rates and materials costs. Data center and manufacturing construction should remain hot. Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, CHIPS Act, and Inflation Reduction Act will give major boosts to infrastructure, manufacturing, and power construction. But, we just talked about this, money will be slow to turn into construction awards and spending, and Buy America labor environmental strings may tie up project starts for years.
Have you talked to anyone who's benefited directly from the Infrastructure Act?
Those I've heard talk about it have only said it's really just covered inflation. Because again, 30-40% inflation. It's really just at best made up for that gap. It hasn't got us ahead anywhere as far as what I've heard. And you need to be careful with what the politicians say too. They're so quick to talk about some of these projects that I know behind the scenes are complete quagmires or won't ever get built.
We've talked extensively about that.
Yeah, and like just for the one I've just really been fixated on lately is we're going out to see potentially an underwater tunnel connecting Germany to Denmark, and I think it's 10 miles under a channel, underwater, submerged, buried tunnel on the bottom of the ocean floor.
Yeah,
it has a highway running in both directions and rail running in both directions, and the cost of it is less than $8 billion.
Whoa.
Which is a lot of money, but
the
new Amtrak tunnel in Manhattan for less than 2 miles, like a little over a mile, is about $15 billion.
Yeah.
So twice that for far far less infrastructure, and I don't see that as a good thing. But you see the
crazy.
politicians saying, "Oh, we got all this money that we're spending on infrastructure right now," but it's like, cool, we're spending it, but what are we getting for it? Continuing on, materials costs and lead times are mostly better, but still quite difficult to deal with. And labor availability has resumed being the number one challenge. So 22-23, number one challenge was material costs for contractors. As that started to go down a little bit, they've started to cope better with that. Materials have come down. Labor availability is right up there. In the long run, finding workers will be a challenge for much longer than materials costs or supply. Slower population growth, meaning fewer workers, but also slower demand growth. Permanent shift from retail to distribution centers, which we've definitely seen over the past 5 years. More wind, solar, etc. And then offices, who the heck knows what's going on there, but it's not looking cheery for sure. So that is your construction outlook. As I said, the past few years, contractors most nervous about the price changes in rock and cement and equipment. It's been just out of control. Now that they've started to choke that kind of stuff down, workforce is number one with over 300,000 open positions right now, and more needed on top of that as people wash out of the industry this year. The top areas of spend are infrastructure, thanks in part in infrastructure and then manufacturing, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, the infrastructure bill, and the CHIPS Act. Although a majority of that money right now is just completely tied up in legal quagmires because of the rules that they've put in with these federal dollars, or because of environmental reviews, so on and so forth. It's really complex to get this money actually deployed. And so that's what contractors are seeing.
I was going to say, is that the reason that concrete has been kind of expensive, is because of the environmental thing, or is that part of the reason?
It's part of the reason, but that's more of a longer term trend, is the increased environmental restrictions from the EPA over the past decades have made cement more expensive.
Cement, yes.
In the more short term, though, what's made concrete more expensive, cement more expensive, is probably diesel prices more than anything, fluctuating.
So like the shipping, I guess.
Well, just you have to burn a lot of diesel to make rocks.
Yeah.
And because you have to get it out of the ground, and then you have to manufacture it. So diesel, power, equipment costs, labor costs. There's a lot of additional inputs that have increased. Suspiciously, on top of that, though, some of these big material suppliers are also recording like complete record profits and dividends for shareholders.
Nice.
And I know that they've just increased prices in some markets because they can, with some contractors sitting there just scratching their heads, unable to do anything about it because they can only buy rock from one company, two companies. It's really dependent upon location.
Yeah.
But I don't ever want to accuse a big corporation of trying to milk more money out per quarter for shareholders, because that doesn't happen in the United States of America. That would be crazy.
Never.
That would be crazy.
You don't have an accident either.
But that's why cement and concrete, I think, are more expensive. Is really just because input costs are more expensive.
Yeah, that's crazy. Must be so frustrating too with the workforce thing, because like the materials thing, you'd be like, all right, well, clearly we're just, getting fucked or whatever by inflation. But I feel like the job thing is trickier, because you have to look at what are we doing? And sometimes it's no one's fault, but Other times
The job thing,
it's preventable. But I would like to see the next kind of like survey I would like to see is why people are saying that they don't want a job in construction. And I see it sometimes in the comments, but it's not very well put.
Yeah, well, a lot of the reasoning is pay. Pay has gone up substantially over the past few years in most markets. But the problem is, and this is what I'm trying to articulate here as well, is I think a lot of people just view construction companies as they're just, people at the top getting richer and richer and richer. Mm-hmm. Most major construction companies I know of, they're doing well, but they've been getting squeezed so badly by all of this over the past few years that they're a lot of their cash is tied up with just dealing with the crazy volatility in the market, or they're withholding a lot of that cash because they don't know what's coming next. There's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And so they're trying as businesses to raise rates. They do want to pay people more. Most of the companies I'm around. But that's just not the reality of running a business in today's world because of all of these unknowns and all of these wild things happening right now. And so, to an everyday worker, it might seem as simple as, well, if you just raise your rates, well, I'll be good to go. But it's not that simple, especially when you're bidding projects years ago and having to deal with these price changes. And choking all of that down while also trying to predict where things are going future state, or you plan your workload around these projects going through, and these projects are held up because of funding or reviews or legal or whatever it is. So it's I have a ton of empathy for both sides. I want the people out in the field to make more money and have a great living. But I also see the business owner perspective as well. It's not easy to be in this world right now, and it won't be for a very long time because the labor thing is not going away. I wanted to read these reports because I do genuinely think it captures where everybody's at right now. I talk to more contractors than most people, and in a very intimate way. I really get to understand what problems they're facing and what they're thinking about, and I think this aligns very, very nicely with what I've seen in the overall market. So labor issues here to stay. Inflation not going anywhere anytime soon, and we're just all having to figure it out together. So that is the state of the American construction industry in 2024. I would say, if I had to summarize it all, everybody in the infrastructure world is cautiously optimistic because there's a lot of dollars out there, but they're just not sure how they're going to be deployed and what's going to come in the future. So thank you to the AGC for these great reports. They're all available online if you want to read through them in detail. The latest report, you can Google it, U.S. Construction Outlook, Torrid or Tepid by Ken Simonson, and Ken will actually be presenting at this year's Dirt World Summit in November in San Antonio.
It's wild.
Yeah, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah,
I'm really excited about it.
You mention people like all the time. I'm like, really? That guy too?
Yeah.
That guy too?
Yeah. It'll be good. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you have feedback or questions or want to hear something more specific, write us at dirttalk@buildwit.com. Yeah. And we'll see you on the next one. Stay dirty, everybody.